on you, you censorious thug.
Minister Blair, Public Safety Minister, Minister Mendicino, National Security Intelligence Advisor Jody Thomas, and RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki, and today you testified that the federal government was committed to exhausting all alternatives to a resolution prior to making a decision to invoke the extraordinary powers of the Emergencies Act. Do you agree that that accurately describes your government's position?
That the invocation of the Emergencies Act was a measure of last resort, was not something to be taken lightly.
Thank you.
And something to do when other options were not effective.
And you are aware that the OPP, along with others, developed an engagement proposal, and you were advised of that proposal at the IRG meeting on February 12th, correct?
It was a proposal, but we had, and it was presented to us, we had more questions about how it would actually work. It was not a complete proposal.
My last question, Mr. Prime Minister, when did you and your government start to become so afraid of your own citizens?
That's a very
I
unfair...
am not, and we are not.
Those are my questions.
Well, good for her. And I'm glad that freedom-oriented lawyers were allowed in. But the other day, I saw Ava tweeting about the imminent release of the Judicial Commission's report. And I wanted to bring her on the show to hear her elocute on that at greater length. Joining me now via Skype from Edmonton, the City of Champions, is our friend Eva Chipiuk. Eva, great to see you again.
Nice to see you as well, Ezra.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on, and you were a very strong part of the team out there, the Freedom Team. I really think that were it not for you guys and Alan Honor of the Democracy Fund, the whole flavor, the whole tone of that commission would have been very different. So I'm glad you were on it. But the other day I saw you tweeting a bit that you were a little worried. And I thought, well, let's get Eva on the show. Let's talk about it because I want to hear it. And you know, you might be right. So first of all, when do we expect the Judicial Commission to issue its report? Is that date set in stone?
It is. And that's one of the concerns I raised on Twitter and via social media, is that the commission is going to publicly release the decision on February 20th. That goes directly to Parliament and the public. So 1 year anniversary of the day the Emergencies Act was revoked.
Right.
So it's statutorily required that within a year, a report is presented to Parliament and presented to the public. Where the concern has been raised is in order to set up the commission, Parliament and Cabinet issued an order in council, and it made certain specifications. And one of the specifications that we noted is that the commissioner was directed by Cabinet to issue a report no later than February 6th, and that goes to Cabinet only. So 2 weeks in advance of Parliament and the public getting the report, Cabinet is getting it.
Got it. Now, I saw that, and that is concerning for two reasons. First of all, it shortens the amount of time the judge has to operate by 2 weeks, and it was a very compressed time frame. By the way, the judge, I think, had an emergency surgery, if I'm not mistaken, which delayed the whole inquiry by a number of weeks anyway. So there were, obviously that couldn't be helped, but it shortened the amount of time. But the idea of Trudeau getting a secret copy of it for 2 weeks to work on his spin is troubling in a way. But Eva, I think that is a standard practice with some reports about the government. If I'm not mistaken, auditors general give their report to the government in advance too. And the rationale, I think, is that since the government is what is sort of being on trial, they have a chance to think about it, digest it, so that when it's released to the public, they can say, okay, we've reviewed it, we accept this, we dispute that. Like, I can understand it so that the government has some time to think about their response. I just don't like the fact that the government obviously will be spinning against any criticism But isn't that sort of normal on like Auditor General reports?
Not that I'm aware. And so let's think about that for a moment. That's the best case scenario, is that it's given to the government in advance. And I do have concerns with the short time frame as well. That shortens the timeline for 2 weeks when we had such an insane schedule in Ottawa. It's, completely unfair for the commission and for the parties to then even shorten it more. So that being one concern. Spinning it would be the milder of the issues, but given that nobody sees it, what if the issue is a little bit more sinister, and then at that point, Cabinet has an opportunity to ask for changes? We don't see it, so we don't know. One thing I do know that happens, at least in other countries in situations like this, is that you would all parties, at a minimum, parties that were involved, lawyers that were involved, should be able to get a copy like under embargo or under some kind of undertakings. We were all asked to sign very stringent undertakings, which we did have some concerns about. So why isn't that put in place for everybody at the same time either?
Got it. I understand that because, of course, the government is one party, but so was everybody else there, I suppose. Exactly. I mean, a party, or at least had some standing. I mean, I wouldn't want the report to go into the hands of crazy activists like, say, Zexi Lee, but at least some of the lawyers there, I think. But do you really think that changes would be made? Is that permitted? Is that in the cabinet order? Because the idea that, other than like a typo would be corrected, I would hope that a judge would push back, because this is it's a judge and a judicial inquiry, if I'm not mistaken. So it has a certain level of authority, and to have one party ex parte, as they say, in secret with no one else there, asking for changes, I've got to hope that's unlikely or irregular. Do we have? Is there anything in the cabinet order that would permit that?
So not that I see it, I think the words are final, but what I would go to is what we saw throughout the inquiry. And I went very optimistic about how it would be handled, but we did see that we had quite a bit of challenges with the redacted documents that the federal government was giving to everyone, and very late disclosure, incredibly late, so late that it's not useful. Same with the redacted documents. It's almost not useful to the parties when you can't understand it, when redactions were deemed to be not proper because there's no lawyers and they're claiming solicitor-client privilege. And it shouldn't be on parties in an inquiry like that to be adversarial within one another. So it was on the commission to ensure that it was a fair process for everyone. Given that actually didn't transpire throughout the whole inquiry, that's where I have a little bit more concerns about the transparency now. We didn't get transparency during the inquiry, so I have a little bit less faith that we're going to have it at this end of the game.
That's an excerpt from my show every night. It's called The Ezra Levant Show. That's me, Ezra Levant. You can see the whole thing behind our paywall. Well, there's a lot of goodies behind there. I do a show every weeknight. My friends Sheila Gunn Reid and David Menzies and Nat and Kat have their shows too. You get a ton of content for just $8 a month. There's so much in there you won't find anywhere else. Go to rebelnewsplus.com.